Hello, folks. So this video is kind of like an impromptu thing. So what I'm trying to do here is talk about Tanzu Committee Edition. The short form is TCE. So talk about TCE and also a bit about Tanzu Framework, which is the short form is TF. And talk about the code, do code walkthroughs, talk about the release aspects, release engineering aspects like build, test, release, and talk about features, talk about gotchas, try out different features and things like that, right? So it's going to be pretty impromptu. I'll try to bring in structures soon, but as of now, what I'm trying to do is just just dive in and see, uh, where it goes, and probably so this will probably serve as a good way for me to understand how I can actually pitch TCE or Tanzu framework and explain TCE Tanzu framework to someone in a one-liner, and also get good idea about how we can actually make TCE and Tanzu framework better, and in terms of like build, test, release, anything, and also just deep dive into the code. I haven't looked at some of Tanzu framework code, so that's something new for me. So that will be also the thing that I get from this. And for people viewing this, you'll basically get an inside view of how it is to actually develop for TC and Tanzu framework, and especially TC where I work as a release engineer, and especially around TC releases and even Tanzu framework releases at some point. And we'll go through everything around TC and Tanzu framework, and we'll also be looking at some upstream projects, for example, Cluster API and all the different providers that we support. For example, Cluster API for Docker, Cluster API for AWS, which is Kappa, the short form is Kappa, and then Cluster API provider for vSphere, short form is CapV, and then Cluster API provider for Azure, the short form is CapZ. And there'll be more in the future, like CapG, the cluster API provider for GCP, and so on and so forth, like DigitalOcean and whatnot. Um, so yeah, that's that. So yeah, let's get started. Let me like probably start off with a small one-liner about what's TC. So Tanzu Community Edition is the open source edition of Tanzu Kubernetes Grid. There are many editions of Tanzu Kubernetes Grid, like basic, standard, advanced. These are all paid, and there is Community Edition, Tanzu Community Edition, which is the community edition, that is the open source edition, uh, and it's open source and free for people to use. And What is Tanzu Framework? So all of these editions have a common core, which is Tanzu Framework. So Tanzu Community Edition is nothing but Tanzu Framework at its core, along with some extra small features. So for example, one of the features that you get with Tanzu Kubernetes Grid is that, um, in general, Tanzu Kubernetes Grid is that you can run your Kubernetes clusters in different cloud providers like Azure, AWS, vSphere, and then also in your local using Docker. So, and that is present in, say, Tanzu framework. That concept and core, that code is all present in Tanzu framework. And Tanzu Community Edition just picks that up and then also adds some extra features. So that's what Tanzu Community Edition is. It's Tanzu framework along with its own extra features. Um, and maybe let's look at an example of how you can actually install TC and then like get started. Look at the different ways you can actually use TC and stuff like that. So we'll just go randomly a bit about this, but I'll assume that people don't know stuff and then like talk about it, right? So let me go to my browser, and I'm gonna go ahead and install the latest release of TC. Um, wait a second. Maybe what I'll do is I'll type this in. And I think the latest release is actually RC4. So 0.10.0 RC4. This is kind of the latest. And I'll just go down. And so we have the Darwin over here. So I'll just copy this link. And I'm going to go to the terminal now. And I'm just gonna cd and do wget. And let's just get this. So I'm in macOS. So, and I'm using the tarball to install. The other ways to install are like, say, Homebrew, Chocolatey. You can also just install using tarballs and zip files. Tarballs for Linux and Darwin, and zip file for Windows. And you can use Homebrew to install in Mac OS and Linux, and you can use Chocolatey for Windows installation. So for now, I'm just going to use the tarball and tar extract verbose gzip file, TCE Darwin 0.10 RC4. So when I extract this tarball, I get this. Okay, so the you can see that there are like a lot of things coming up over here. So basically, what we are looking at is like, this is the release candidate for RC4 of 0.10 release, and these are all binaries actually within the bin folder, and there are two scripts, right? So one script to do the installation, another script to do uninstallation. And the binaries in the bin folder or bin directory are like, there are many binaries, right? So this is the main binary or the core binary, and the Tanzu CLI command line interface, and there are other binaries which have the name Tanzu-plugin. So these are basically plugins. So we call them as CLI plugins. So these are also binaries, and they work standalone, but they are meant to be used along with Tanzu. So many of these plugins are all built in Tanzu Framework repository, and Tanzu is also built in Tanzu Framework repository. The binaries that are built and that are coded or like developed in Tanzu Community Edition repository are standalone cluster, unmanaged cluster, conformance, and diagnostics. Everything else comes from the Tanzu Framework repository. So if you go to the browser, you can actually see the Tanzu Framework repository like this, Tanzu Framework. So this is the Tanzu Framework repository, and you will get Tanzu CLI and everything from here. I mean, like, the code is basically here, and it just gets built and provided by Tanzu Community Edition. And Tanzu Framework also has its own releases where you can get the Tanzu CLI and everything. So you can see that the latest release is 0.16. And Tanzu Community Edition uses a particular version of Tanzu Framework. So in 0.10, if you go to the terminal, you can actually see that. So let's install this, right? So let me just do TCE Darwin 0.10 and do an uninstall of the existing stuff. So I have to put in my password and then just do a cleanup basically with an uninstall, and then because I already had some stuff installed, and then do an install like this, and I should be good to go. So you can see that it actually installs it in a particular directory called the library, like the home directory / library application support inside Tanzu CLI. So once it does all of that, it runs this command called Tanzu init to initialize stuff, and it's still running. and it's doing some verification. So if you can see on the top of the window, it's actually checking each and every binary. So all the binaries are signed for Windows and macOS. And in macOS, if the binaries are not signed, there'll be errors saying that, hey, this is coming from an unknown developer or unknown source. So we sign all the binaries. So the binaries are just being verified. So if you can, I'm not sure if you can see the pop-ups, but I can see some pop-ups where it says verifying quickly and it goes away. So currently, I think checking out the management cluster plugin, and there are many plugins like that. So let's just wait for a moment, and it should be done. And this is taking some time. Okay, I think we're almost there. Yeah, we're almost there. So we have just one more, and then we'll be done. Okay, cool. So we are done with the initialization, and then it also adds a CLI plugin repository, and the name of the CLI plugin repository is TCE, and it comes from a Google Cloud Platform bucket. So this bucket is basically the object storage bucket. It's similar to S3, Simple Storage Service from AWS, Amazon Web Services, but in Google Cloud Platform, it's called the Google Cloud Storage GCS, so GCS bucket. So here, the CLI plugins are stored. And we also have the core admin plugin repository, CLI plugin repository. So now if you simply do Tanzu version, you can actually see the version of the Tanzu framework coming up over here, which is 0.10.1. So we actually don't have the latest Tanzu framework as of now, but we will soon get the latest Tanzu framework version in Tanzu communication, like we'll bring it in. But as of now, we pull in the 0.10.1 Tanzu framework version. Latest in Tanzu framework is actually 0.16.0 as of now, as we saw just a few minutes ago. And to see community edition version, you can look at the CLI plugins of the community edition. For example, say unmanaged cluster version, and you'll see 0.10 RC4 or something like, say, conformance. I'm not sure if there were any changes in conformance, but let's see. Okay, so yeah, so you can see how it has RC4 over here. And then we also have diagnostics plugin, which is diagnostics. And we have standalone cluster, which is going to get deprecated. So we don't change the version for that. It just stopped. We have changed it recently, but anyways, it has stopped. We are not going to change the version for this, or like it's going to get removed from the next version of Tanzu Community Edition. But so those are the plugins that we have in Tanzu Community Edition inside the repo, and the other plugins come from Tanzu Framework, like I mentioned. And you can see those plugins being mentioned here, which is like Builder or Cluster or Kubernetes Release or Management Cluster, Package, Secret, Login, and things like that, right? So you can see all of those over here. So you can see CodeGen is also a plugin. Cluster, Kubernetes Release, Login, Pinnape auth, something that we didn't notice here. Yeah, we didn't notice it here. And you can also see that when you do Tanzu plugin ls, list, list. You can see all the list of Tanzu plugins over here, Tanzu CLI plugins. Okay, so it says unable to query remote plugin repositories, could not fetch manifest from repository core, context deadline exceeded. Okay, there was some issue with getting the core plugin repository, core CLI plugin repository plugins. So you can actually see the repositories over here for Tanzu plugin repo list. And you can see that it has core TCE core admin. Can you get some more details? I don't think so. I think that's all we have, just the names. but basically it's all pointing to GCP buckets. For example, core points to this one and things like that, right? And you can also notice how core admin points to this Tanzu CLI TCE Tanzu CLI framework admin. And this is just Tanzu TCE Tanzu CLI framework only. And then this is TCE Tanzu CLI plugins for TCE repo, plugin repo. So that is the CLI plugin repo, not the Git repo. And so you can see over here plugins like Builder, Cluster, Code Gen, Conformance, Diagnostics, and all of that. Let me just do a thing again, plugin list again, and see what it says and see if it's still context deadline exceeded. And yeah, I don't know what's the problem here. Something to check out. And so that's that. I'm gonna just clear the screen now, and let's look at, say, for example, one of the plugins. So I'm going to actually run Docker in my local first. So I'm just going to run the Docker for desktop. I do have a license. I'm just going to use that. But if you don't, you can use an alternative for Docker desktop instead of using Docker desktop. Let me see if it's up and running. It's going to take some moments. Docker PS should help me tell if it's up. And my GUI. So let's see, still starting. Mm, okay. Mm, it's taking quite some time. Probably because there are many things running in my local. Just gonna struggle a bit, I think. Um, Let me see if I can actually get rid of some of the stuff. Because it's taking a lot of time. Hmm. So I'm trying to see if I can actually get access to the dashboard to see if there's anything going on. And I'm also going to just do a check for updates to ensure that I can actually use the latest in case there are issues with the current version. And let's see. I'm going to pause the video for a moment and see what's going on. Okay, I think it's almost done. It's going to come up. Mm, mm. Yes, I do have some updates. Let me just get that right. I'll pause the video and then just do that. Mm. Okay, so looks like it's going to take time to update, but I have my Docker engine running, the runtime is running, and I'm able to do Docker PS. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this latest plugin called unmanaged-cluster. I'm just going to see how this runs. and take it from there. Probably continue doing another video and talk about, say, release engineering, or just internal code details about things like, say, unmanaged cluster, or even management cluster, workload cluster, or cluster API and stuff like that. So for now, let me just do this. I'm just gonna go ahead and create a demo one cluster, and let's see how that goes. So you can see how this unmanaged cluster creates a cluster on top of Docker engine. So it's a local Kubernetes cluster, and it's a very similar, and like it's almost the same as the Kubernetes and Docker cluster, kind cluster. So it's actually now creating the cluster. And so you can see some extra stuff over here. So it says created cluster directory, resolving this thing called Tanzu Kubernetes release, which is basically a Kubernetes release. For example, say 1.21, 1.20, 1.19 dot something. So the major minor patch version. But that is something created by VMware. So here we have Tanzu Kubernetes release. So it's a Kubernetes release packaged by VMware, and the Kubernetes version is v121.5, 1.21.5, and then like it says where this stuff was downloaded. So and then finally it's processing all of that, and it's selecting a base image. So you can see kind Kubernetes and Docker, kind cluster node, and that's the container image, and then core package repository. So packages here are basically like applications that you can install on top of Kubernetes as a platform. So the word core is being used here because there are some packages that are like core to the cluster, are like very what do you say, very important for the cluster to even run. For example, container network interface plugins, for example, say Antria, Calico, and whatnot. And then things like, say, what else? I mean, there are some packages that are core for something to work in a very basic manner. Everything else is like user managed package. For example, say Grafana, Prometheus, FluentBit, or Harbor, and things like that, right? Cert Manager and all. And you can also see that you have, so you can see the additional package repositories. This is actually user managed repository coming from TC, and we get this version, which is the latest stable release of Tanzu Community Edition, and the same is used for the package repository. So this is an index containing things like Grafana, Prometheus, and all particular versions of those. And then we have cap controller, which basically helps us to run packages on top of, say, Kubernetes clusters very easily. So we basically use Carvel tooling, and we have the package custom resource, and then package repository custom resource, and then we install packages, and then we get the package installed, like we get pods and everything. What do you need to actually install your package or your application on top of Kubernetes? So as of now, I think this is going to take some time for this cluster to be created. I'm going to pause and then like get back when this is done. Awesome. So we are done with the creation of the cluster. So you can see how it says creating cluster, and then it basically says base image downloaded, which is basically this. And then it says cluster created, and then you can also troubleshoot using this command. And then it says installing the cap controller. This was pending for a lot of time, and then it finally was done. And then it says reconcile succeeded, and then it says container network interface, the Antria was installed, and then kubectl context set, and then you can check available packages, pods, and whatnot, right? So I'll simply run this and to show you, say, available packages that you can install. And so you can see that it says retrieving available packages, and it's like loading. And and shows things like, say, certificate manager, cert manager, contour, external DNS, FluentBit, Gatekeeper, Grafana, Harbor, Knative, particularly the serving component, and then local path storage, Multis CNI, container network interface, and then Prometheus, Velero. So you can also do kubectl get pod or get po -a, and you can see a lot of pods running. So Andrea 1 is still running now, the agent, and you can see that we have one node. It's a one node cluster, and this one node is running on Docker containers. So it's a Kubernetes in Docker, like I mentioned. This is not ready because this Andrea thing is like still up, is still coming up. So you can see this when you say describe nodes. You can notice the error being mentioned as the network is not initialized, right? So here you can see. So if you look at the bottommost, you won't see much. This is all the kubelet stuff, I think, and kubeproxy stuff. You see a bit above, you can see some details over here um, in the leaves and stuff. So you can see how it says kubelet not ready, and then it says container runtime network not ready. So it's the container network interface stuff. So container runtime network, and then it says network ready false. Reason network plugin not ready, network plugin returns error, CNI plugin not initialized. So when Antria starts up, I think we should get that up. But as of now, it's still in init stage, and it's taking time probably because this is taking up a lot of resources. So it's going to be a bit slow with the. So it's taking a lot of memory and CPU and all that. But that's that. And you can also see that you can delete the cluster like that, just like using Tanzu unmanaged delete demo one. And to see the kubectl, the context, you can just do kubectl config get contexts, and you should be able to see the kind hyphen demo one. And even if you do, if you have a tool like kubectx, you'll be able to see kind demo one over here. And I'm going to delete this for now, but yeah, if you want, you can just keep it up and then use it to run something. I'll delete this in a moment. But so I just wanted to show that this is how you can actually use one of the CLI plugins from TCE. There are others like say conformance, which you can use to run conformance tests using Sonoboy. And then you can also diagnose any issues in your clusters. And then you have the standalone cluster, but that's going to be deprecated, as you can see. But that's that. And yeah, and you can also see that the plugin name was unmanaged cluster, but I was using unmanaged. So that's just an alias for unmanaged cluster. So you can see the alias over here. When you say Tanzu unmanaged cluster, you can actually see that it has alias unmanaged cluster, which is unmanaged, or UC unmanaged cluster or unmanaged. So these are all like your what do you say, short forms. So you can do UC list, unmanaged cluster list, or unmanaged list or just unmanaged. So it will show the list of unmanaged clusters you have. Unmanaged cluster. I don't think clusters is right. That's just wrong. So it just doesn't work. It's instead us if you meant this. So that's that. And I'll see you in the next video where I'll probably go into the details of, say, for example, get into the code of unmanaged cluster and see what they do. And then discuss details and see what it is all about, the creation of this cluster and how it is done. And we'll also probably then at some point deep dive into things like, say, management cluster, and then workload cluster, and then deep dive into the code of conformance diagnostics plugin, and then many other plugins. First, we'll just use them, and then we'll also deep dive into the code. And we'll also look at the release engineering details, the team in which I work in. There's a lot of that, how we do build test release for Tanzu Community Edition, and then probably also look at the build test release of Tanzu Framework. I'll probably get the help of my friend Rajesh from the team, and who's working on Tanzu Framework a lot now. And what else? Like, yeah, I think that's all. Like, if you haven't tried out TC, do try it out. Send any questions that you have over on Kubernetes Slack workspace. My name is Karupaya in the Slack, and You can also ask questions in the Tanzu Community Edition channel. And yeah, that's all. And the other thing that I might end up doing in the next video is also look at the different options that are there in unmanaged cluster. So unmanaged cluster, and for example, you can actually mention the container network interface. For example, you can mention Calico, and then you also have things like, say, I don't know, existing kubeconfig, or pod CIDR, classless interdomain routing. So it's the IP range, and then port mapping and stuff like that. And also service CIDR for the Kubernetes service, and these are for the Kubernetes pods, and then like most stuff like that. Um, and yeah, and we'll also be looking at how you can actually run the latest Tanzu Kubernetes release, or basically the latest Kubernetes version. Like for example, say 122. How would you do that? Because we just got 121, but 122 is released. So in TC, we are trying to actually ensure that we can actually provide users to be able to use the latest versions of different software, including especially the core, which is the Kubernetes, the platform, and also other packages and services and everything that we provide in components. So we want to provide the latest bleeding edge so that users can use it and try it out. So if Kubernetes releases, let's say today, say version 123 or say 125, 126, in TC we want to provide it immediately, say in a few hours, at least in a matter of few hours, for which we are actually working towards that. And we will be talking about that, how to use a particular version of like Kubernetes when you create, say, unmanaged cluster or something else. Um, so yeah, I'll see you in another video about Tanzu Community Edition, and that's all for this one. Bye bye.